Tonight, before we step into our story, let's prepare your space for rest. If you haven't already, try turning off the bright lights around you. Dim the room so your eyes and mind can soften. If there's background noise like the TV or sharp sounds, lower them or turn them off completely. Let the quiet be your companion tonight. Place your phone a little farther away so you won't feel the urge to reach for it. Many people, especially as we age, find that screens only keep the mind awake longer. You deserve freedom from that little glow of distraction. It's also natural that sleep changes with age. Sometimes you fall asleep quickly, sometimes the night feels longer than you'd like. You are not alone. Millions of people your age face the same restless hours. It's not your fault, it's simply part of the rhythm of growing older. If you're still awake, try gently rubbing the back of your neck. Move your fingers in small circles, let the warmth spread across your shoulders, then down to your arms, to your hands. Now give your calves or ankles a slow massage, just enough to ease the muscles. These little touches remind your body that it is safe, that it can let go. And remember, your body doesn't need to rush. Sleep is not a test, it's a gentle visitor arriving in its own time. Your only task is to open the door quietly and allow it in. Take a deep breath now, hold for a moment, and let it out slowly. Feel how the air carries away tension little by little. You've lived through countless days, countless nights, faced joys and challenges, carried others through storms, and celebrated sunshine. Tonight, you don't need to carry anything. You only need rest. As you listen to this story, let your heart soften with memory. Let your body sink deeper into stillness and know that you are cared for even in this moment. Now, let us begin with an oak tree that stood like a guardian of childhood summers. There was a field just beyond the farmhouse, wide, golden, with tall grasses swaying under the summer sun. At the far edge of that field stood an oak tree, larger than any other nearby. Its branches stretched out like strong arms, offering shade, and its trunk was thick and gnarled with age. To a child's eyes, it seemed as if it had stood there forever. The tree was not just wood and leaves, it was a companion. During those long, warm days, the oak became a gathering place. Clara, or sometimes her brothers, would wander toward it, carrying a basket or perhaps just their laughter. Beneath its branches, the air always felt cooler, touched by the slow rustle of green leaves overhead. The earth beneath the oak was soft with fallen leaves from seasons past, and the roots was above the soil, making little ridges that became seats for tired legs. The bark, rough yet strangely comforting to the touch, often pressed against a young back as she leaned and listened to the world around her. There was always sound in the fields, the chirping of crickets, the soft hum of bees drifting from flower to flower, and the distant call of meadowlarks. From beneath the tree, the whole world seemed alive and moving, yet somehow safe and steady. Children gave the oak many names. Sometimes it was called the fortress, other times the castle, and occasionally it became a ship on a wide ocean of grass. All it took was imagination. And suddenly the branches became sails, the roots became walls, and the field itself was transformed into a sea or battlefield or kingdom. The shade beneath the oak was often the setting for whispered secrets. Clara remembered pressing her palm against the rough bark while promising to keep childhood pacts. There were moments of play, but also moments of quiet reflection. The kind of quiet only a child can truly know, when the heart is still learning the weight of the world. On hot afternoons, her mother sometimes sent her there with a book or a small piece of bread. She would settle on the roots, let her fingers trace the edges of the pages, and let her eyes drift from the words to the branches above. The book was always slower to read in that shade, not because the story wasn't interesting, but because the breeze and the calm turned each page into an invitation to dream. The oak, in its way, became a witness. Each summer, it stood in the same place, yet it seemed to grow with the children. Taller, broader, stronger. Clara liked to think it remembered her, even when she was gone for long winter months. When she returned in spring, the first thing she noticed was how the leaves unfurled like tiny green flags of welcome. Sometimes she brought a small ribbon and tied it to a low branch. The ribbon would stay there for weeks, fading in the sun, fluttering in the wind. It was her secret way of saying, "I was here, and I will come back." Even after storms or heavy rain, the ribbon often remained, though weathered and worn. Evening under the oak felt different. When the sun dropped lower and the light turned golden, the tree cast a long, stretching shadow across the field. Clara often sat in that shadow, watching how the colors of the sky changed: pink, orange, lavender, and then the deep blue of coming night. She liked how the tree seemed to connect earth and sky, standing tall as if it were a bridge between the two. As fireflies began to glow in the field, she often felt the oak was glowing too, not with light, but with presence. The air grew cooler and the smell of grass stronger, and she would sit quietly, hugging her knees, letting the silence of twilight settle into her. Those nights when she walked back toward the farmhouse, the oak remained behind her like a guardian, watching, steady, unmoving. She always felt that no matter how far she went in life, she could return and the tree would still be there, waiting. Years may have blurred many things, faces of neighbors, details of days, but the oak remained in her mind with startling clarity. Its bark, its branches, its shadow, its song in the wind, all as vivid as if she had just left its shade yesterday. And now, lying in her quiet cabin on this rainy night, the memory of that oak returned, soft and gentle. She could almost hear the leaves moving above her again, almost feel the cool earth beneath her hands. As the rain tapped on the roof, it blended with memory, until the sound itself became the rustle of summer leaves. Life in those years moved at a slower rhythm. The farmhouse stood at the heart of it, with the fields stretching out in every direction, and the oak tree marking the boundary between work and wonder. Clara's days followed the steady pattern of chores, small joys, and moments of rest. In the mornings, she helped her mother gather eggs from the hens. The soft clucking filled the air, and the warmth of the eggs against her palms always felt like a secret gift from the day. Then came the task of sweeping the wooden porch, scattering dust into the bright sunshine. These small duties carried their own gentle comfort, a rhythm she grew to know as well as her own heartbeat. After midday, when the sun stood high and the air shimmered with heat, the family often rested. Clara would find her way back to the oak tree. There, the shade offered not just coolness but also a sense of freedom, a pause from the structure of daily work. She would stretch out across the roots, toes brushing the grass, eyes drifting between the sky above and the branches overhead. Some afternoons, she carried sewing or mending with her. The thread in her hands moved slowly, yet her gaze often wandered, lost in the changing light through the leaves. Other times, she brought a small pail of water and a slice of bread, nibbling as she watched ants march in neat lines across the roots. The smallest details became companions: the smell of earth, the sound of cicadas rising and falling, the distant call of cattle from the pasture. Her brothers, when they joined her, turned the oak into a place of play. They carved little marks into the bark, declaring who had climbed the highest branch. They pretended to be explorers charting a new land, shouting to each other through the tall grasses. Their laughter echoed, mingling with the warm air until even the tree itself seemed to share in the play. But Clara, more often than not, found peace in quiet moments there. She would rest her head against the trunk, listening to the way the wind moved through the leaves. The sound was never hurried. It was like a voice that spoke slowly, urging her to pause, to breathe, to simply exist. In those hours, the weight of chores and expectations slipped away. She became just a girl beneath a tree, safe and unbothered by time. Occasionally, her mother would call from the porch, her voice carrying across the field. That call meant supper preparations or help needed with younger cousins when they visited. Clara would rise reluctantly, brushing leaves from her dress, casting one last glance at the oak before returning. Always, she promised herself she would come back the next day and the day after. Some afternoons were marked by sudden summer storms. The sky would darken, the air turn heavy, and a hush would sweep over the field. Clara would dash to the farmhouse, heart pounding, yet she always looked back to see the oak. It stood unmoving, weathering wind and rain, a reminder that strength could be silent and steady. Later, when the storm passed, she often found fallen branches or damp leaves scattered at its base. Yet the tree remained as constant as ever. Evening chores brought her back to the rhythm of family life, carrying pails of water, folding laundry, setting the table for supper. These small acts tied the day together. When night fell and lamps glowed softly, the memory of the oak lingered in her mind, like a secret she carried into her dreams. Looking back now, she realized how much those afternoons beneath the branches shaped her. They were not just moments of rest, but lessons in stillness, in paying attention to the quiet wonders of the world. The tree taught her that life was not only about tasks and duties, but also about pausing to notice the way sunlight shifted across the ground, the way a bird perched lightly before taking flight, the way her own breath slowed when she let herself simply be. And so, on nights when the rain tapped gently on her roof, Clara felt those memories return. The oak rose again in her thoughts, tall and certain. Its shade cooled her spirit. Its whisper in the leaves reminded her of the beauty of small, ordinary days. The oak tree was more than shade, more than silence. It was also the stage for countless games, where Clara and her siblings let imagination turn an ordinary field into endless adventures. On summer mornings, when chores were finished early, they would race each other across the grass, feet thumping, laughter carrying on the breeze until they collapsed in the cool shadow beneath the branches. The roots made natural seats, but also obstacles for games. They leapt over them, balanced along them like tight ropes, and sometimes dug small holes near them to hide tried treasure, made from smooth stones or marbles. The tree always gave them something new to invent, a fresh story that unfolded with every visit. Sometimes the oak became a fortress. Clara would gather sticks and lean them against the trunk, building walls to keep out imaginary enemies. Her brothers, armed with wooden swords cut from branches, would attack, laughing as they tried to breach the defenses. When they grew tired, they all collapsed in the grass, declaring victories or laughing at defeats that mattered only in the moment. Other times, the oak transformed into a great ship. The field turned into an ocean, and the children became sailors braving wild seas. Clara stood at the base of the trunk, pretending it was the mast, one hand shielding her eyes as she gazed across the waves of grass. Her brothers shouted warnings of storms, and together they leaned against the wind, rocking and swaying as if truly carried by the sea. The games often ended with quieter moments. Clara would pick small wildflowers and braid them into crowns. Sometimes she placed them on her brothers' heads when they weren't looking, and they wore them without realizing until laughter gave it away. The tree trunk bore scratches and small carvings, initials, hearts, and simple drawings etched into the bark, marks of childhood that blended into the oak's long history. On days when cousins visited, the oak became a gathering place for all. 10 or more children might crowd beneath its wide branches, chasing each other, singing songs, or playing hide and seek in the tall grass. The sound of their joy filled the air, echoing across the field. Even now, Clara could recall the feeling of her lungs burning from running, her cheeks flushed with heat, and the sweetness of cold water carried out by her mother when playtime stretched too long. At times, games gave way to simple observation. Clara would lie flat on her back beneath the oak, watching clouds drift lazily across the sky. She liked to point out shapes, horses, castles, sometimes even faces, that seemed to appear for a moment before dissolving. Her brothers teased her for being dreamy, yet often they lay beside her, eyes following hers, letting the sky tell its own stories. Evening games often carried a different mood. Fireflies blinked into life as the sun slipped low, and the children ran through the grass trying to catch them. Their jars glowed softly, little lanterns carried beneath the oak's branches. Laughter mixed with the songs of crickets, and the air was filled with a magic that only summer nights could hold. When Clara remembers these games now, she feels not just the joy of childhood, but also the deep comfort of belonging. The oak was never just a tree. It was a partner in their stories, a keeper of secrets, a silent witness to laughter and tears alike. Each scratch on the bark, each ribbon tied to a branch, each worn root beneath small feet told a part of their growing up. As the rain continued to fall outside her cabin, she closed her eyes and saw again the flicker of fireflies, the quick movements of children darting between roots, the oak standing tall, its shadow stretched wide, its leaves whispering above them. The memory was so vivid, she could almost hear their laughter again, distant but familiar, as if carried back through the years by the soft rhythm of the storm. The oak tree was not only a summer companion, it lived with the rhythm of the seasons, marking time in a way more steady and true than any clock. Clara grew up watching it transform, each change leaving its own impression on her memory. In spring, the first sign of life came as tiny buds pushing from the ends of bare branches. She remembered running through the damp field, shoes wet with morning dew, to see the pale green unfurling. The air smelled of earth and rain, and the oak seemed to stretch awake after its long winter rest. Birds perched in its branches, singing songs of return, their nests tucked carefully in the crooks where limbs met. Clara always felt spring was a promise, new beginnings whispered by every leaf. Summer brought fullness. The branches grew heavy with leaves, their green deepening with the sun. The tree's shade was wide, offering cool refuge from heat that shimmered across the fields. Clara often pressed her back against its trunk, feeling the rough bark warm from sunlight, and listened to cicadas buzzing endlessly overhead. Summer under the oak meant laughter, play, and hours of quiet dreaming. Autumn painted the oak in colors that seemed almost magical. Leaves turned gold, amber, and russet, swirling down with every gust of wind. Clara loved walking through the carpet of fallen leaves, hearing them crunch beneath her shoes. Sometimes she gathered the brightest ones, pressing them between book pages to keep as treasures. The tree, though shedding, never felt weaker. Rather, it glowed in the soft light of autumn evenings, back a reminder that beauty often came before rest. Winter was a different story. The oak stood bare, its branches stark against gray skies. Snow gathered at its base, clinging to ridges of bark while the wind howled through its skeleton frame. To young eyes, the tree might have seemed lonely then, stripped of life, but Clara sensed otherwise. There was a strength in its stillness, a patience in its silence. She often looked at it from the farmhouse window, comforted by the knowledge that beneath the frozen surface, life waited quietly, ready to return. Each season gave the oak a new face, yet it remained the same tree. That constancy mattered to Clara, for as the years passed and she grew, the tree reminded her that change was natural, but roots endured. It was a lesson she didn't recognize then, but one that returned to her often in later years. She remembered the joy of spring picnics beneath its young leaves. Her mother spreading a blanket, placing jars of preserves and bread upon it, while bees hovered close, curious about the sweetness. She remembered summer afternoons when the air was so hot the very ground seemed to waver, yet the oak's shade offered cool reprieve. She remembered autumn evenings when her father chopped wood nearby, the scent of fresh-cut logs mingling with the crisp air while she gathered acorns scattered at the oak's feet. And she remembered winter mornings when frost glittered along its branches, catching the pale sun, making the world look touched by silver. The seasons circled endlessly, yet the oak was always there, steady and sure. And now, as rain pattered gently against her cabin roof, Clara thought of those cycles, the turning of time, the way each season left its gift. Spring's promise, summer's joy, autumn's beauty, winter's patience. Each lived within her still, carried from childhood into the quiet of her present life. The memory eased her, reminding her that even sleepless nights like winter would eventually give way to mornings full of light. Just as the oak endured, so too could she. The oak tree was not only Clara's companion in solitude, it was also the silent witness to gatherings of her family, moments stitched together by laughter, food, and voices that carried across the wide field. On summer Sundays, after church, the family often chose the oak as their meeting place. Baskets of food were brought out, fresh bread, jars of pickled vegetables, slices of pie wrapped carefully in cloth. Clara remembered the way everyone spread blankets beneath the branches, the bright colors of the fabric cheerful against the green grass. Children ran freely, their laughter ringing like bells through the air. The oak offered both shade and a center, a place where mothers could call them back when plates were ready. Fathers leaned against the trunk, hats tilted low, talking about crops, weather, or news from town. The tree seemed to hold all these voices together, its branches arching overhead like a protective roof. Clara especially remembered the sound of her grandmother's voice, soft yet firm, telling stories of her own youth. Sometimes it was about hardships survived, storms that took down barns, winters that froze wells, but often it was about joy too. Dances in the town hall, letters from faraway relatives, evenings by lamplight filled with songs. Beneath the oak, those stories took on a special glow, as if the tree itself was listening. Music often found its way into these gatherings, a fiddle, a harmonica, sometimes just the sound of hands clapping to keep time. Clara's uncles would sing, their voices rough but warm, carrying melodies that rose through the branches. Even the children joined in, shouting refrains they half knew, while the oak seemed to sway gently with the rhythm. Meals beneath the oak were never hurried. People lingered, savoring each bite, pausing to laugh, to tell stories, to simply enjoy being together. The shade cooled the heat of the day, and the breeze carried the scent of food, grass, and blossoms. For Clara, those moments were woven with comfort, a sense of belonging that wrapped around her more tightly than any blanket. In autumn, gatherings took a different tone. Families came together to prepare for the colder months. Apples were peeled and sliced, corn was husked and jars were sealed for winter storage. Beneath the oak, these tasks became lighter, shared by many hands and voices. Clara liked how the chatter filled the air, how her mother's laughter blended with her aunt's, how cousins teased each other while working. The tree's branches, painted in shades of amber and gold, seemed to glow above them as if pleased to host such life. Even in winter, the oak was not forgotten. Though snow covered the field, families still made their way to it on clear days. They built snowmen near its trunk, played games that left their cheeks red with cold, and sometimes tied small bits of cloth to its branches as a sign of blessing for the coming year. Clara could still see her father brushing snow from a low limb, lifting her up so she could hang her own ribbon, a memory that warmed her even now. Spring gatherings brought a sense of renewal. After long months indoors, families came back beneath the oak to celebrate warmth's return. The tree with its new leaves seemed to join the celebration. Its green canopy stretched wide again, sheltering laughter, meals, and music. Clara remembered lying back, full of bread and honey, listening to her relatives talking above her, their voices blending into a low hum, drifting into dreams while sunlight flickered through leaves. As the years passed, these gatherings became landmarks in her memory. Faces grew older, children became taller, and new babies were carried into the shade. Some voices were eventually absent, but their presence lingered, felt in the space between words, in the songs that were sung again and again. The oak had held them all, gently, faithfully. Now, as Clara lay listening to the rain, she thought of those faces, those voices. She could almost hear her grandmother's story weaving through the patter of drops, almost see her father's smile in the flicker of lightning. The oak was more than wood, it was the keeper of her family's spirit. And in remembering, Clara felt the warmth of their love surrounding her, still steadying her heart even in the quiet hours of the night. The oak was not only a place of gatherings, it was also a confidant, a silent keeper of secrets that Clara never dared to share with anyone else. As a child, she often slipped away from the noise of the house, carrying with her a small book, a ribbon, or simply her own thoughts. She would sit with her back against the rough bark, tracing the lines with her fingers as though the tree could read her heart through her touch. When she quarreled with her siblings, she ran to the oak. She whispered her frustrations into its trunk, pressing her cheek against the bark as though the tree might answer with understanding. "They don't listen," she would murmur, "but you do." And in that quiet space, it always felt as though the oak did listen. There were times she laughed alone under its shade, sharing jokes with no one but the branches above. At other times, she cried quietly, hiding tears from others, letting the tree absorb them. In her young mind, the oak was more than just wood and leaves. It was alive, a guardian that would never betray her. One summer evening, she brought her first diary beneath the branches. Its cover was simple, worn quickly with use, but to Clara it was precious. She began filling its pages with hopes, fears, and dreams, always writing with the oak nearby. Sometimes she even read her entries aloud, believing that the tree's leaves rustled in approval. When she grew older, the secrets deepened. Questions about herself, about the world, about the strange pull of the heart. She confided in the oak when she felt the first stirrings of affection for a boy in town. She told it everything. The way he smiled, the way he tipped his hat, the way her stomach fluttered when their eyes met. She never told her family, not even her closest friend. Only the oak knew. There was comfort in its silence. No judgment, no interruption, just the steady presence of a trunk that had stood for generations. Sometimes she carved initials into the bark, tiny letters hidden among the grooves, as if marking proof that her secrets were safe. The oak also became her place of decision, when choices weighed heavily, whether to pursue schooling, whether to accept responsibility at home. She came to the tree. She sat with folded hands, closing her eyes, listening to the wind through its branches. Somehow, the answers came easier there, as though the tree whispered clarity through the rustle of leaves. During moments of fear, too, the oak was her sanctuary. Storms frightened her as a girl, thunder booming across the sky. Yet when she sat beneath the oak, she felt protected, as if the roots anchored her against any chaos. She once told herself that no lightning would dare strike a friend, and so her fear softened. Even in times of joy, the oak was her chosen witness. The day she first sang aloud, when her voice cracked and then steadied, she chose to do it beneath those branches. The day she received a ribbon for her essay at school, she ran first to the oak, waving it in the air, proud as though the tree itself had awarded her. As Clara lay now, older, listening to the rain at night, those secrets returned to her memory. They came not with shame or regret, but with tenderness. She realized that the oak had shaped her, had been the quiet mirror reflecting back the truest parts of herself. She smiled faintly in the darkness. How strange, she thought, that the strongest confidant of her life had never spoken a word. Yet in its silence, it had given her more comfort than any voice could. The rain slowed, tapping gently now. Clara imagined the oak still standing where she had left it, its bark holding every whisper, every laugh, every tear. Secrets sealed not in ink or paper, but in the grain of wood, in the lines of its rings, safe for all time. And with that thought, she drifted closer to rest, carried by the memory of trust, of silence, of a friendship that needed no reply. The oak stood as a witness to every season of Clara's life. In the springtime of her childhood, it bloomed with tender green leaves. Buds unfurling like tiny promises whispered into the wind. Clara remembered the way the branches seemed alive with bird song, sparrows darting in and out, their wings catching the morning light. She would lie on her back, staring up at the canopy, feeling as though she were beneath a cathedral of living green. Spring was a time of beginnings. She would bring baskets of wildflowers, weaving them into small garlands to hang on the lower branches. To her young eyes, the oak looked proud, dressed in ribbons of color. She whispered to it, telling the tree of her hopes for the year, planting little dreams in its shade, as if the roots themselves could make them grow. Summer brought fullness, warmth, and long afternoons. The oak's leaves thickened into a deep shade, offering relief from the burning sun. Clara remembered the hum of cicadas, the buzzing of bees, and the way the air shimmered with heat. The grass beneath the oak turned soft and golden, flattened by the weight of many afternoons spent there. It was under those branches that she read her books, sketched in the margins of her notebook, and sometimes dozed off with her head resting against the bark. The oak became her shelter, her private corner of the world, where time seemed slower, softer. On nights when the air was warm and filled with the fragrance of earth and leaves, she would sneak out with a blanket. Lying beneath the oak, she gazed at the stars through the spaces between the branches, each star flickering like a quiet secret of the universe. The oak, she thought, was the perfect frame for the sky. Autumn came with its colors, rich reds, fiery oranges, soft golds. The oak transformed into a lantern of beauty, glowing against the cool blue skies of fall. Clara adored the crunch of fallen leaves beneath her shoes, the sound sharp and satisfying. She would gather armfuls of leaves, tossing them into the air, laughing as they rained back down on her hair and shoulders. The oak seemed to sigh in autumn, its branches loosened, shedding what it no longer needed. Clara thought of it as a kind of wisdom, learning to let go season after season. She often sat quietly then, watching the cycle of change and learning without words that letting go could be graceful. Winter, however, was different. The oak stood bare, its branches stretched like arms etched against the pale sky. Snow sometimes weighed heavy on its limbs, bending them slightly, yet never breaking them. Clara loved the stillness of those winters. Wrapped in her scarf and coat, she would trudge through the frosted grass to visit her old friend. Pressing her mittened hand against the trunk, she would feel the solid strength beneath the cold surface. It comforted her to know that even in its stillness, even in its sleep, the oak endured. Sometimes she leaned her forehead against the bark, whispering softly, "You're still here, even when the world feels empty." And in that quiet moment, she drew courage from the tree's resilience. Years later, as she thought back, Clara realized the oak had taught her the rhythm of life. Spring showed her beginnings, summer gave her joy, autumn taught her release, and winter offered endurance. Each season mirrored the stages of her own journey. Her childhood was spring, full of play and discovery. Her young adulthood was summer, vibrant and busy. Middle age was autumn, where she learned the art of letting go, children leaving home, old roles fading, new meanings emerging. And now her later years felt like winter, quiet yet strong, stripped down but still holding a deep, steady core. The oak had never moved, never wavered. Yet it had transformed again and again, just as she had. As Clara lay in her bed, older now, listening to the night, she could almost feel the seasons shifting once more. A part of her wondered if perhaps she too had become like the oak, still here, weathered by time, but holding inside her the memories of every spring, summer, autumn, and winter she had ever lived. The thought soothed her. The rhythm of life was not to be feared. It was a song, a cycle, a dance repeated endlessly, written into the leaves, into the roots, into her very breath. And with that, Clara closed her eyes, imagining herself once again beneath the oak, listening to the birds in spring, the hum of summer, the rustle of autumn, and the hush of winter, all seasons that woven together into peace. The oak had always been there, standing tall through storms and sunshine, through the countless seasons of Clara's life. Yet she knew, deep inside, that nothing in this world lasts forever. Clara remembered the last time she walked the familiar path that led to the old tree. The air was cool, and the sky held the faint colors of autumn, brushed in soft gold and fading blue. She moved slowly, her steps no longer light but steady with the weight of years. The oak greeted her as it always had, its branches stretching wide, leaves rustling gently in the breeze. She reached out her hand and touched the rough bark, feeling once again the strength that had comforted her since childhood. As she stood there, Clara whispered her gratitude. "You have given me shade in the summer, shelter in the storms, and comfort when I was lonely." Her voice trembled, but it was filled with warmth. She closed her eyes and remembered the countless afternoons spent beneath its branches, the books she read, the naps she took, the secrets she whispered into the bark. She remembered the laughter of her younger self, twirling in piles of autumn leaves, the quiet nights under the stars when the oak framed the heavens just for her. Time had passed and the land around the oak had changed. Fields once wide and open had become dotted with fences and houses. Paths once walked by children were now paved, yet the oak still stood, a survivor, a witness. Clara thought of how it had endured drought, wind, snow, and rain, bending but never breaking. She saw herself in that endurance, in the way she too had weathered life's storms. She sat down at the base of the tree, her back resting against the trunk. For a moment, she was no longer old, no longer frail. She was once again the little girl with wide eyes and messy hair, holding a handful of wildflowers. The oak seemed to wrap its strength around her, a reminder that even though her own days were drawing to a close, the world would carry on. The leaves would still fall in autumn. The branches would still bloom in spring. Clara breathed deeply, feeling the cool air fill her chest. She let her thoughts wander, drifting like leaves carried by the wind. She thought of her family, her friends, the many years that had shaped her. She thought of her joys and her losses, her laughter and her tears. Most of all, she thought of the quiet moments, like this one, when life felt simple, steady, and good. As twilight deepened, she rose slowly, placing her hand once more on the trunk. "Goodbye, old friend," she whispered softly. "Thank you for everything you've given me." The oak did not speak, of course, but in the gentle sway of its branches, in the rustle of its leaves, Clara felt the answer. A farewell, and yet not a farewell, for the memories it held would remain with her always. Walking back along the path, Clara carried no sadness in her heart, only peace. She knew that partings were not endings, but transformations, just as autumn leaves fell to make way for new buds in spring. And so, as the stars began to appear in the sky, Clara looked up one last time. She imagined the oak standing tall behind her, its branches reaching into the night, its roots deep in the earth. Timeless, eternal in spirit. That night, lying in her bed, Clara closed her eyes. She imagined herself resting once more beneath the oak, the soft hum of summer cicadas in the air, the cool shade around her, the endless sky above. Her breathing slowed. Her thoughts grew lighter, drifting like the falling leaves, and with the oak still standing strong in her mind, Clara finally let herself sink into the deepest, most peaceful sleep. You've reached the end of tonight's story, and just like Clara, you too can let go now. The oak tree stood strong through every season, a quiet witness to the passing of time. And like that oak, you have carried so much strength within you through storms, through sun, through all the chapters of your life. It's not always easy to rest. Sleepless nights can feel long and heavy. But remember this, you are not alone. Millions of others your age also face nights like these. And just like them, you deserve peace, you deserve comfort, you deserve gentle rest. If your mind is still wandering, bring it back to the oak. Picture its wide branches swaying slowly in the night breeze. Picture the soft grass beneath it and the quiet stars above. You are safe there, wrapped in the steady embrace of nature's rhythm. Take a slow, deep breath, and as you exhale, feel your body release its tension. Let your shoulders drop, let your hands grow soft, let your feet grow heavy and warm. Every breath carries you further into calm. Remember how Clara felt at the end of her journey. She wasn't afraid, she wasn't restless, she was at peace, surrounded by memories of love, of joy, of simple moments. You too carry a lifetime of beautiful memories within you, treasures that no sleepless night can ever take away. And now it's your time to rest. Let the story linger in your heart like a soft lullaby. Let your thoughts grow quiet like falling leaves drifting slowly to the ground. The world will be here tomorrow. For now, your only task is to sleep. Good night. Sleep well, and may your dreams be as gentle as the shade of the old oak tree.